Hulu's The Act tells the shocking true story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. I'm Zach Laws of Gold Derby, and with me now is one of the co-creators of that series, Nick Antosca. Nick, thank you so much for being here. And let me just start by asking you, what about this story made it something that you wanted to translate into a television limited series?
The relationship between Dee Dee and the BuzzFeed article that started it all, and see the documentary and sort of think, how could this have happened? How could a mother do that to her child? And I want to know more. I mean, I think everybody who reads that story, hears about this story, wants to know, like, what was that like? How could this have happened in the world that we live in?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, tell us just a few more details about the actual events of the story.
So, for those who don't know, Gypsy Blanchard was told by her mother that she was sick since she was a little kid. She was told she had all manner of medical issues, that she couldn't walk, and she was basically mother. As she got older, she started to question her mother, as adolescents do, and she started to seek independence, agency over her own life. And in response, her mom clamped down on her and tried to suppress her personhood, her sexuality, her identity, and basically make her a doll. And Gypsy took matters into her own hand, and her perspective on the world had been entirely shaped by her mother, and she had the tools of manipulation that her mother gave her, and she turned them against her mom. She met a man named Nick Godejohn online on a Christian singles dating website, and she convinced him to kill her mother.
Right. Now, given that this is based on a true story, there are real life people who are still alive, such as Gypsy, who's in prison right now, and her boyfriend, Nick. Were you able to talk to any of the real life participants, or was that something that was not possible given the circumstances?
No, I didn't. Michelle Dean, the co-creator, who wrote the BuzzFeed article, talked to them extensively in her research for the article. She spoke to Gypsy, she spoke to the family, but that research was done by the time that we started. So we relied on that, on publicly available information, and the some stuff that Michelle had gathered during the reporting that had never made it into the article.
So then talk a little bit about how you and Michelle worked with each other. I mean, what did each of you sort of bring to the project?
Well, it's a collaborative process. We're both writers. She had already done a year plus of investigative journalism. So we talked about her research. We talked about how to turn that into 8 episodes of television, which requires some dramatic license, and some condensing of what actually happened, and streamlining. But we wanted to stay true to the psychological and emotional truth of what really happened as best we could interpret from all the information that we had.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, I guess, the thematic undercurrent of the show, I mean, obviously on the surface, it's a true crime series, but underneath, there's this really fascinating mother-daughter relationship. I wonder if you could talk a bit about developing that.
The mother-daughter relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah. In a way, that's, I think, the most relatable part of the story, in the sense that we all, maybe not to such an extreme degree, but we all break away from our parents. We all start to question what our parents tell us. We all see the world through the the lessons that our parents teach us. And to me, that was maybe the most compelling thing about the story. That mother-daughter relationship, the coming of age story. And so that's what we always focused on, what we always came back to when we were shaping the story for maximum dramatic, emotional, psychological purpose.
I wanted to talk a bit about the cast. Let me start with Patricia Arquette as Dee Dee Blanchard. And I mean, I don't, if you look at the real Dee Dee and of course Patricia Arquette, you couldn't find two more different people. So, I mean, what about Patricia Arquette made her right for this role?
She's an incredible actress. I mean, that's what made her right. You know, I think we were all fans and admirers over decades. So she was our first choice. Laura de Clermont-Tonnerre, who directed 3 of the 8 episodes, including the pilot. When we sat down to talk to her, we were all kind of, who's your first choice? You know, Patricia. And we sat down with Patricia after she had read the pilot and the article and seen the documentary. And we talked about what our goals for the show were and how we wanted it to be and why and how Dee Dee did what she did without making her likable or in any way justifying, but understanding, so that even as you recognize that she did a monstrous thing, many monstrous things, you could live inside her skin at least a little bit. And Patricia's curiosity and insight about what a mother would be thinking or would have to go through in order to put essentially poison into her daughter's body, knowing that she wasn't sick at all. She really thought a lot about it. She did a lot of work and dedicated, as everybody says.
And then Joey King as Gypsy Rose. Again, something that's totally different from anything she's ever done. And to say the least, she's very unrecognizable in the part. What about her made her right? Was she always the first choice? Or?
We auditioned a lot of people and very, very talented people. And then when we saw Joey, the search was over. I was familiar with her work from Fargo, from The Conjuring, and then I saw the kissing booth during our casting process, and none of those things really sort of prepare you for what she does in the act. And she didn't come in and kind of do an imitation of Gypsy. We asked her not to. We didn't want people to come in and just kind of do the voice or do not a caricature, but an impression. And so she auditioned just as herself, I guess. And she has the vulnerability. She has the acting chops. She's also incredibly smart. And so once we saw her, there really wasn't any doubt. And then to see her bring that to set every day and transform, not just transform from Joey King, the actress, into Gypsy, the person, but to transform as Gypsy over the 7-8 years of story time was really remarkable, because it's a very, very hard role.
I wanted to ask about the stylistic approach to the show. I mean, you mentioned one of the directors, Laura de Clermont-Tonnerre, who directed 3 of your episodes, and then you had some others. What were you guys looking for in terms of a director for the show? I mean, what did you want the general approach to be?
Well, first of all, what you don't want is the true crime director. You don't want somebody who's sort of kind of meat and potatoes or feels like what you would traditionally think of as like a TV look. We wanted it to be like a hint of a fairy tale, and a little bit dreamlike, so that you're experiencing the world in a way through Gypsy's eyes. So, the show starts in a very sort of pastel landscape color scheme, and this house, which was a Habitat for Humanity house, was very modest. Really felt like a castle to them when they moved in. And we wanted we wanted directors who would see the world through Gypsy's eyes a little bit. And Lar, Stephen Pyatt, who also did 2 episodes and was the producing director, Hannah Fidel, Christina Cho, Adam Arkin, they all brought something special to it.
You mentioned the true crime aspect of it, and I mean, this there has been a recent boom, shall we say, of true crime, whether it's limited series or documentary series or movies. I mean, it's always been there, but I mean, recently it seems to be having a renaissance, shall we say. What do you think it is about the genre of that? I mean, just burrowing underneath and figuring out, what led to these events. Why do you think we're so fascinated by that?
Curiosity about human nature, curiosity about the dark side, what's going on in your neighbor's house, and what I was referring to before in a different. How could this happen? You can watch the most bizarre story if it's fiction and marvel at the imagination of the creator or whatever, but it's a different thing to know that this really happened. However, that can be a crutch from a creative point of view, where you're just sort of relying on, well, it really happened. You still have to bring all the dramatic, interpretation, you have to apply the same principles of storytelling to true crime that you would if it was fiction. You still have to make sure everything kind of otherwise. And I've said this before. Michelle and I talked about Boys Don't Cry, Heavenly Creatures as particular inspirations for the season, because those are lurid tabloid stories in a sense, but in execution, it's about finding the humanity and the cinema in those stories, so that they don't just feel like prurient retellings.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the interesting things, particularly about this one, is you're not excusing Gypsy for her crimes, but you're also not painting her as a straight out monster. I mean, it's like, is that a difficult thing to achieve? On the one hand, like gaining sympathy and empathy for a character like this, or on the other hand, accurately presenting the actions that they took?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge. Because Dee Dee, Gypsy, and Nick Godejohn, we thought it was important to look at them, as complex human beings, and in a sense, all of them were victimized in their lives, and all of them did terrible things to other people. So it was important to see both sides.
Right. Now, obviously, this story has more or less wrapped up, at least in terms of the season. Will you guys be doing another installment of this show? Have you thought about another crime that you would like to tackle?
We've thought about other crimes, but I signed up to do the Dee Dee and Gypsy Blanchard case, and everybody else has been, we've all been focused on that for the past year plus, more than that. So I think nobody wants to do another season just for the money, but there are a lot of powerful stories out there.
Right, absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you at home for watching. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button below, and make sure you visit us on goldderby.com for all the latest Emmy news.